Tom, I thought just for change here, today is the National Teachers Day. We heard from people early in the show today talking about people who had a major impact on them or people, who teach their kids now. And I just wondered, as you look back on a teacher or someone who had a lot of influence on you, who would that be?
At different levels. It was, for example, in high school, a wonderful guy named John Fasciano, whom I'm still in touch with. Also, Mr. Cotnoir, our history teacher. Let's see, who else? CJAD, Don McFarlane, a guy who taught me so much about politics. And in university, I'd have to say Erwin Kotler, who was my tutor in first year law school. So, yeah, a whole bunch of really great people over the years. I've been very lucky.
Well, that's impressive. You had Erwin Kotler as a tutor?
Yes,
That's
so
remarkable.
it was a thing that existed back in the day. So we're going back almost 50 years. Actually more than 50 years, 73. And it was a system where every incoming student was given one of the professors as their tutor, and they had to follow you for the first semester and give you specific work that had nothing to do with the organized classes that you would sit in with everybody else at the same time. This was their work to make sure that you were understanding how to read a case, how to read a statute, followed you through, talked with you. And mine was Erwin Kotler, a freshly minted professor who had just come back to Montreal from Yale.
Wow. 50 years ago, huh, Tom?
Yeah.
And you're only 55 now. It's remarkable.
50,
All right.
51 this fall, yes.
All right. Let's talk about a couple of stories in the news. We've been talking a lot today. I just asked listeners with respect to this PQ suggestion that cell phones be banned in school. In other words, the entire day, not just in classes. The rule is right now. What do you think about this?
I agree completely. Full stop. That's it.
Okay.
I'm in. And, I've got adolescent grandchildren. I watch with them and I watch with their parents. And it's a lot of schools, by the way, they already have that. Public schools, not private schools, public schools. At the school in St. Jerome, where one of my granddaughters used to go, they had that rule. And it was, you get to school, you had to leave it in your locker, and you weren't even allowed to take it out at lunchtime. But there was a period of the day, if you had to phone your parents, you could go to a specific area and it was monitored. So there was no TikTok, there was no nonstop social media stuff all day. Because one of the biggest challenges with social media, kids always drive their parents crazy doing stuff they know they're not supposed to do. Back in our day, I hope nobody thinks less of me. It's legal now, so I can mention it. We would smoke the occasional joint. And that was just, it was just to drive, everybody up the wall. But at least, it was tempered by the fact that it wasn't that available at all times. Social media, satisfies a lot of the same centers in a growing brain, and it's constantly there. It's omnipresent, and it's so hard for parents and even smart kids get sucked into that whirlpool. So I think that they're on the right track, frankly.
My theory, and I mentioned this, not that it matters at the end of the day whether you support this idea or not, but I said that I think this is a rather brilliant strategy by the PQ because bottom line is when you cut off access to social media for these kids, 99% of that social media access is in English. That's 8 hours less that kids have English. And this has been a big topic lately. Jean-François Lisée brought this up, Tom, and Paul St. Pierre Plamondon brought it up when I talked to him a couple of weeks ago. This idea that kids now in French school, when they're not in class, are speaking English in the hallway, at lunch, whatever, because, of course, they have access to all that. It's pervasive, right? Social media is 99% English.
Blaming hearing too much English in the street in front of McGill University when your kids are actually watching and listening to everything in French all the time anyway, and watching their English pick up, it's a geometric progression. It's absolutely astonishing to watch. And it is because it's in English. And I don't think that that's the reason to stop. It doesn't matter what language it's in. It's that it gobbles up all of your available bandwidth and your ability to think. So if you want to have a nice balanced life, let your parents control it when you're at home. But at school, the school's going to say, nope. And I'm in. It has nothing to do with French or English. It has everything to do with having, we always talk about what kind of world we want to leave to our kids. I think we should also talk a little bit about what kind of kids we want to leave to the world.
Fair enough. All right, 5:12. Let me get to this next topic, which, as it turns out, is still to do with language. Look, what happened with this Liberal MP? So this is Francis Drouin calling a couple of, I guess, CJEP or are these professors who are presenting this data suggesting that if you go to CJEP in English or you do your university studies in English, even in Quebec, you'll end up living what they call an English life, and he basically called that out.
Yes. So this is a really weird thing. So one of these experts is not considered much of an expert by people who are experts. So this guy was saying in very crude terms, he said that these guys making their presentation were full of excrement. And you can't do that. So on a first level, it's just, okay, you've got to show some respect for the people and for the institution, and you're just not allowed to talk like that in Parliament or in a committee. But at the same time, it's the type of expression that people use in everyday life, and you've heard it 1,000 times if you haven't used it yourself a bunch of times. And so it was hilarious on a first level. I just did a French panel show where when they played the tape, I cracked up. And of course, you try to get serious after that and say, of course, you're not supposed to talk like that in Parliament. But there was a refreshing aspect to it, especially given the fact that one of the people is, somebody who's got a real researcher is just going to be like a judge, just going to look at the facts. Okay, here's what the facts are, and not try to impose a preconceived view on it. So, especially on language, there are people who come up these things with a point of view. They've already got their angle, and then they're going to be looking around for stuff to reinforce or comfort them in what they've decided is already happening. So this is where it gets tricky. So this is where this guy was coming off. If you actually watch it, there was not much going on that had a heck of a lot to do with CJAD or anything else, but it just became a thing. It became quite viral. Of course, it was another source of indignation. So time to move on.
Okay. I'm just wondering, is this going to be the attack we're going to see now going forward? This the new sort of tack they're going to take? The idea that if you study in CJAP and you go to school in English, we have to worry, the nationalists will have to worry that their children grow up in English?
Yeah, and you have to be careful because people who are in CJAP are adults. So once François Legault came up with out of there, 17.5% of the kids in an English CJAP could come from the French sector. You were just opening up a Pandora's box. If you could restrict adults and what they're allowed to do with their lives, because most of them are 18 years old and they're adults, and what the heck is the government doing telling an adult what language they can study in? And all it's doing, by the way, is the fellow who we're just talking about, this Drouin fellow, he's from the Glengarry Russell area in Ontario, just over the border, and they don't have to worry about that because what's going to happen is a lot of the kids who are in the French system now who do want to learn English, they're just going to go to, Carleton. They're going to go to the University of Ottawa. They're going to find a way out of this thing. What you're seeing now in a lot of the private schools here, like the top line private schools, are no longer accepting any government funding. So, a top school like LCC is simply withdrawing. They used to get the government subsidy that goes to all private schools here in the province of Quebec. But once you were on the hook for that, you had to follow Bill 101. And now they're just extracting themselves from it. And they're having a grade 12. So that means their kids will have more options than kids coming out of the Quebec high school system after grade 11 because that grade 12 is transferable, of course, into the Ontario sector.
So finally, Tom, I just want to talk about yet another member of François Legault's government, his media relations director, walking away. I think this is 4 people now who've walked, right?
Yeah, this is Manu Dion, a really respected guy, not one of the battle-hardened folks, who just lash out at anything, very thoughtful. And it's interesting for me politically, if you take a step back, we're about halfway through Legault's second mandate. They're taking a look at the landscape and saying, okay, this is not doing anything good right now. I've got good experience. I've been through a lot. These are people like Dion. He lives in Montreal with his family. He works in Quebec City. This is a routine that I know all too well. And it's exhausting. And he's just saying, I've got a great job being offered to me. He's going to the Federation of Medical Specialists. And some people are tisking and saying, well, he knows secrets from the cabinet table and he knows what the government's strategy is negotiating with the specialists. And I thought that Christian Dubé proved once again just how amazing he is, because he just said, look, the guy's got a deep understanding of government. Now he's bringing that deep, ability in communications to these. It'll help keep communications open. He says, it's fine. It's not a problem. Big high five to Christian Dubé for the 10th time this month.
Speaking of high fives, real quick, what did you make of that video that the Premier released, speaking of Christian Dubé, patting themselves on the back over how they've managed the healthcare system?
Well, our healthcare system's a disaster, but it's not all on the watch of the CAQ. And Christian Dubé has come up with a solution, very much like Geneviève Guilbeault. Her idea of an agency to handle big projects and public infrastructure for transport, she's completely on the right track, the same way Dubé was on the right track when he created his health agency. So let's give it some time. But he doesn't get to boast very much because we still don't have family doctors, and you still can't get an appointment with a specialist, and you still can't get your operation, and more people are being driven into the private sector. So he's full of prunes if he thinks our system's doing well.
Well, there is that. Tom Mulcair, back tomorrow morning with Andrew Carter. Thank you, Tom.